Next up, we got the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New York Islanders. And, well, this one got pretty interesting for me in the pre recording conversation that we had, because you brought up to me that the fact that I completely forgot Matthew Barzal is back skating for the Islanders. And I have done a lot of thinking over the last half hour or so on my prediction for this series, but I will get to that in a minute. Let's look at the moves they made during the season. The Hurricanes last offseason got Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty. Pacioretty, unfortunately, only played 5 games before suffering yet another horrific injury. And during the season, they brought in Shane Gostisbehere and Jesse Puljujarvi, while the Islanders last offseason brought in Alexander Romanov, which ended up being a pretty damn good move for them. And during the season, Pierre Engvall and the huge news of the Bo Horvat trade. So we all know that Andrei Svechnikov is going to be out for the Hurricanes, which just made this series much more interesting. Liam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably one of the most interesting series in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I think you can, separate interesting and entertaining. I think the Rangers Devils is probably going to be the most entertaining series.
Mhm.
Interesting. I mean, look, like you said, Matt Barzal is coming back for the Islanders. The Islanders have the second best goaltender in the conference in Ilya Sorokin, right up there with Igor. I think Igor and Ilya are probably tied up with one another. I think, Linus Ullmark is the best goaltender in the conference. So I think that definitely gives the Islanders an edge in that department. But again, I look at the power play, I look at special teams. I mean, the Islanders power play is woefully bad. And is Matthew Barzal going to be able to change that enough to be able to where you're going to be able to get production when you're up a man? I just don't think so. I think the Hurricanes, even without Andrei Svechnikov, who unfortunately went down in the middle of the season, I think they are still deeper, and I think they are a more well-coached group. I think that, the difference in goaltending isn't too heavy. I think Freddie Anderson was a goaltender who was involved in the Vezina discussion last year. Again, he hasn't had his best season this year, but he's been healthy and he's given, the Hurricanes some stability in net. So I think that the Hurricanes are going to win this series. I could see it getting extended a little bit, but gun to my head, I'm taking Hurricanes in 7 games here.
Interesting. So, funny enough, I actually changed my pick during our pre-recording conversation. I have the Islanders in 7 at this point because I looked at, keeping this theme going, I looked at the Islanders' last 27 games. I told you this number was going to be all over the place. I warned you. I warned everyone. They were 15-8-4 in their last 27. And the Hurricanes, very interestingly, they were 9-9-2 in their last 20.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't call that stumbling into the playoffs as a number 1 seed, I obviously there's probably been worse, but that's a huge asterisk for me.
Yeah, they almost surrendered the number 1 seed as well, the division lead, to the New Jersey Devils. So again, it wasn't really the best stretch to end the season for the Hurricanes. But again, I look at their depth chart. I mean, again, we faced them last year, of course, us meaning the Rangers. And it was a tight 7-game series, and I would expect the same against the Islanders. I think they play very similar styles of, again, tight defensive hockey, not a lot of room. But again, I just look at the back end. I look at Jacob Slavin, we know what Jacob Slavin can do. They finally have some offense from the back end. Brent Burns and Shane Gostisbehere should not be taken lightly as a duo that is providing a lot of offense from the blue line. Brady Shea as well. Jalen Chatfield, we saw what he could do against the Rangers, sniping one on Shesterkin. They got a good duo depending on injuries or if anybody has to stay out between Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. And yeah, good depth as well. So I think that the Hurricanes are going to win this series. I think that the Islanders have really been inconsistent throughout the year. You combine that with the woeful power play, the penalty kill, which has struggled as well. And again, just the lapses. And I just don't know along a 7-game series, if the Islanders are going to be able to compete with a battle-tested team like the Carolina Hurricanes. But again, we'll see.
I hate to do this, but you may have just talked me into switching my prediction back to the Hurricanes. I'm just gonna look at the teams on paper right now. While the Islanders do have some good pieces, you're right. I honestly do think that Carolina still has the better depth, even with Svechnikov and Pacioretty being out, which still I can't believe that happened to Pacioretty. But the
Shades, let me add this one thing here. These are two teams that really struggle on the power play. And one team made an adjustment at the trade deadline, and one team did not. And bringing in Shane Gostisbehere, I think it's really going to make a difference. And it could be whichever team wins the special teams battle wins the series. And I just don't see it with the Islanders power play. I mean, if anybody has watched Islander games with any bit of consistency, I mean, they're just better off playing at even strength. I mean, that's how bad they are. So that I think is an important aspect, despite Ilya Sorokin. Because if the Hurricanes need to win games 1-0 or 2-1, we know they'll do that. And again, you look to their last playoff matchup against one another. Wasn't it 2 years ago when the Hurricanes swept them? So similar core that the Islanders are throwing out there to the one that they threw out 2 years ago. Of course, Sorokin is the difference, but was goaltending really the issue 2 years ago? I would argue not. I would argue it was the depth and the goal scoring, and that hasn't changed. And the roster, despite not having Svechnikov, like you just said, is extremely deep for Carolina. So I just think people are writing them off too fast here. But I wouldn't blame you if you took the Islanders. But let everybody know, what's your did I sway you, or where are you at?
So I'm actually very glad you brought that up because I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, it may have been three, when the Hurricanes lost both, I think it was Sammy Vatanen and another defenseman heading into the playoffs. And that in itself swayed me on my prediction for them that year. And I ended up being dead wrong. So to answer your question, you did sway me back to the Hurricanes because they basically played with Pacioretty. They haven't throughout the season. And, well, I mean, I've been wrong before in this particular instance with players being out, thinking that's going to sway a series. So I'm going to switch my pick back to the Hurricanes. Thank you for talking me into that. And hopefully I won't make the same mistake again.
It's all right. We help each other here on Pucks and Brews.
We do. So in the long run, we both have the Canes in. I have the Canes in 7. I still have the Canes in 7.
I have the Canes in 7 as well. You
Canes
know what?
in-
Canes in 6 games.
I like it. I like it. Just that little dig at the
Bye
Islanders.
bye.
I like it.
Yeah. Got to throw that in there.
Yes, and I love it.